Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Chloe stepped off the small propeller plane onto the icy tarmac. Behind her, Mike herded their 5 children down the narrow stairs, his voice a mix of excitement and exasperation. "Watch your step, Zoe. Tommy, help your sister with her bag." Chloe's stomach churned, a familiar anxiety creeping up her spine. It had been years since she'd set foot in her hometown, and the memories weren't exactly warm and fuzzy. She took a deep breath, the cold air stinging her lungs, and forced a smile as she turned to face her family. "Welcome to Whittier, guys. Try not to freeze solid before we reach Grandma and Grandpa's house." The kids' laughter echoed across the nearly empty airfield, their breath visible in little puffs of white. Chloe's own smile felt brittle, like it might crack at any moment. She'd been dreading this trip ever since the letter arrived, filled with her mother's looping handwriting and thinly veiled guilt trips. As they made their way to the rental car, Chloe couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Small towns had long memories, and she knew her departure hadn't exactly been low-key. She'd left as David and returned as Chloe, her transition a subject of whispered gossip and judgment. Mike's hand found hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You okay, babe?" She nodded, not quite trusting her voice. The drive to her parents' house was a blur of snow-covered pines and distant mountains. Chloe found herself pointing out landmarks to the kids, surprised at how easily the memories came flooding back. "And that's where your Uncle George and I used to go sledding. Nearly broke my arm trying to jump that creek." "Can we go sledding, Mom? Please?" Tommy's eyes were wide with excitement. Chloe hesitated. "We'll see, buddy. Let's get settled in first, okay?" As they pulled up to the familiar 2-story log cabin, Chloe's heart hammered in her chest. The porch light flickered on and the front door swung open. Her mother stood there, arms already outstretched. "Oh, you're here! Come in out of the cold!" The next few minutes were a whirlwind of hugs, exclamations over how much the kids had grown, and the controlled chaos of getting everyone inside with their luggage. Chloe's father hung back, his smile not quite reaching his eyes as he shook Mike's hand and awkwardly patted Chloe's shoulder. "Good to see you, son. Chloe, glad you could make it." Chloe swallowed hard, pushing down the familiar ache those words always brought. "Thanks, Dad. We're happy to be here." As the kids swarmed their grandparents with stories of the flight and questions about Alaska, Chloe found herself drifting towards the living room windows. The view was just as breathtaking as she remembered, endless forest stretching to the base of snow-capped mountains. It was beautiful, yes, but also isolating. She'd felt trapped here once, suffocating under the weight of expectations and small-town narrow-mindedness. "Earth to Chloe!" Her mother's voice broke through her reverie. "I was just telling Mike about your father's retirement party. It's this Saturday at the Legion Hall. The whole town's coming out to celebrate." Chloe turned, her smile feeling more like a grimace. "The whole town, huh? That'll be something." Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly. "Now, Chloe, I know you've had your differences with some folks around here, but this is important to your father. It would mean the world to him if you'd come." "Of course we'll be there, won't we, hun?" Mike chimed in, ever the peacemaker. Chloe nodded, her throat tight. "Sure, Mom, we wouldn't miss it." Later that night, after the kids were tucked into various guest rooms and pull-out couches, Chloe found herself sitting on the back porch. The aurora borealis danced across the sky, green and purple ribbons weaving through the stars. Despite the beauty, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over her. The screen door creaked, and Mike joined her, draping a thick blanket over her shoulders. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Chloe leaned into him, grateful for his solid presence. "Just wondering if coming back was a mistake. Did you see the way my dad could barely look at me? And this party? God, Mike, it's going to be a disaster." Mike's arm tightened around her. "Hey, give them a chance. It's been years. People change. And if anyone gives you trouble, they'll have to deal with me and the kids. We've got your back. Always." Chloe managed a small smile. My own personal army of chaos, huh? You bet. Now, come on, let's get some sleep. Tomorrow's bound to be interesting. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as Chloe's mother insisted on taking the grandkids into town for some real Alaskan winter gear. Chloe begged off, claiming a headache, and found herself alone in the house with her father for the first time in years. The silence was deafening as they sat at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee growing cold between them. Finally, her father cleared his throat. Your brother George called this morning. He's worried about Storm. Chloe's head snapped up. Storm? What's wrong? Her father shifted uncomfortably. Well, it seems the boy's been acting out. Dressing funny, talking about wanting to be a girl. George is at his wit's end, especially with Stone breathing down his neck. Chloe's hands clenched around her mug. And what exactly does Uncle Stone have to do with this? You know how he is. Traditional values and all that. He's been putting pressure on George to straighten the boy out. I told George to bring Storm by while you're here. Thought maybe you could talk to him. Well, you know. The implication hung heavy in the air. Chloe took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Dad, if Storm is questioning their gender, what they need is support and understanding, not to be straightened out. Her father's face clouded. Now, Chloe, I know you've got your big city ideas, but this is different. Storm's just a kid, probably confused. A little guidance is all he needs. The kind of guidance I got? The words were out before Chloe could stop them, sharp and bitter. Her father flinched as if she'd slapped him. For a moment, Chloe thought he might argue, but instead his shoulders sagged. I know we didn't handle things well with you, but can you blame us for wanting to protect Storm from going through what you did? Chloe softened slightly. Dad, what I went through wasn't because of who I am. It was because of how people reacted to it. If Storm is questioning their gender, the best thing we can do is listen and support them, no matter what. Before her father could respond, the front door burst open and the house was once again filled with the happy chaos of children and shopping bags. The moment was lost, but Chloe couldn't shake the worry that had settled in her chest. She needed to talk to George, and soon. That evening, as Mike corralled the kids for a movie night, Chloe slipped out to meet her brother at a small diner on the edge of town. The place hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked vinyl booths, same flickering neon sign advertising best pie in Alaska. George was already there, nursing a cup of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept in days. He stood as Chloe approached, enveloping her in a bear hug that smelled of pine and motor oil. God, it's good to see you, sis. They settled into a booth, and for a moment, it was like no time had passed at all. But the worry lines etched around George's eyes told a different story. So, tell me about Storm. What's really going on? George ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. It started small, you know? Wanting to grow out his hair, borrowing his sister's clothes. I didn't think much of it at first. Kids experiment, right? But lately, Chloe, he asked us to call him Sky. Says that's who he really is inside. Chloe nodded encouragingly. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, I'm scared shitless. Not because of Storm. Sky, whatever makes them happy, I'm all for it. But this town, you know how it can be. And Stone's been on the warpath ever since he found out. What's that bastard done? Chloe's voice was low, dangerous. George's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. Showed up at the house, drunk off his ass, yelling about how no nephew of his was going to be a goddamn freak. I decked him, Chloe, right there in front of Sky and everyone. Good, Chloe said fiercely. He's lucky that's all you did. Yeah, well, now he's threatening to get Child Protective Services involved. Says we're encouraging deviant behavior or some bullshit. I don't know what to do, Chloe. I can't let them take Sky away, but I don't know how to protect them either. Chloe reached across the table, squeezing her brother's hand. We'll figure it out, George. I promise. First things first, we need to make sure Sky knows they're loved and supported no matter what. Can you bring them by Mom and Dad's tomorrow? I'd like to talk to them. George nodded, relief evident in his eyes. Yeah, I can do that. Thanks, Chloe. I don't know what I'd do without you. As they parted ways, Chloe felt a fierce protectiveness well up inside her. She'd fought her own battles in this town, but the thought of Skye facing the same prejudice and hate made her blood boil. She was older now, stronger. This time she wouldn't be fighting alone. The next day dawned bright and clear, the kind of crisp winter morning that made everything seem possible. Chloe paced the living room, alternating between excitement and anxiety about meeting Skye. When the doorbell finally rang, she nearly jumped out of her skin. George stood on the porch, one arm around a lanky preteen with a mop of unruly dark hair. Skye's eyes were wide and uncertain, darting between Chloe and the ground. Hey, kiddo, Chloe said softly. I'm your Aunt Chloe. I've heard a lot about you. Skye looked up, a spark of recognition in their eyes. You're like me, aren't you? Dad said you used to be his brother. Chloe knelt down, meeting Skye's gaze. That's right, and now I'm his sister, just like you might be his daughter instead of his son. How does that feel to you? Skye's lower lip trembled slightly. Scary, but right? Like I've been wearing the wrong clothes my whole life and finally found something that fits. Chloe felt tears prick at her own eyes. I know exactly what you mean. Listen, Skye, I want you to know something really important. No matter what anyone else says, you are perfect just the way you are. Your feelings are valid and you deserve to be happy and comfortable in your own skin. Skye launched forward, wrapping their arms around Chloe's neck in a fierce hug. Over Skye's shoulder, Chloe saw George wipe away a tear of his own. The rest of the morning was spent talking, laughing, and sharing stories. Chloe's kids quickly adopted Skye as one of their own, drawing them into elaborate games of make-believe. For a few precious hours, the weight of the outside world seemed to lift. But reality came crashing back all too soon. As George was preparing to leave, a truck came roaring up the driveway, tires spitting gravel. Uncle Stone stumbled out, his face red with anger and alcohol. Where is he? Stone bellowed. Where's that little freak? Chloe and George moved as one, positioning themselves between Stone and the house where the kids were playing. You need to leave, Stone, George growled. Now, Stone sneered, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Chloe. Should have known you'd be behind this, corrupting another innocent kid with your sick ideas. Chloe felt a familiar fear rise in her throat, but she pushed it down, standing tall. The only sick thing here is your bigotry, Stone. Skye is a child who needs love and support, not your ignorant hate. Stone lunged forward, but George was quicker, catching him with a solid right hook that sent him sprawling. I told you before, stay the hell away from my family, George snarled. As Stone struggled to his feet, spitting blood and curses, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Chloe's father emerged from the house, cell phone in hand. I've called the police, Stone. It's time for you to go. For a moment, it looked like Stone might try to fight, but the approaching sirens seemed to penetrate his alcohol-fogged brain. He stumbled back to his truck, peeling out of the driveway with a spray of gravel. In the aftermath, Chloe found Skye huddled in the back bedroom, tears streaming down their face. He hates me, Skye whispered. Everyone's going to hate me. Chloe gathered them close, her heart breaking. No, sweetheart. Stone hates what he doesn't understand. But there are so many people who love you exactly as you are. Your dad, your aunt, your cousins. We're all here for you, and we're not going anywhere. As she held Skye, Chloe made a silent vow. She wouldn't let this town crush another young spirit. It was time to take a stand, not just for Skye, but for every kid who felt different, who didn't fit the narrow mold this place tried to force them into. Chloe reached out to old contacts from her social work days, arranging for resources and support for Skye and their family. She organized a small support group for LGBT youth and their allies, meeting in the back room of the local library. Word spread quickly in the small town, and not all the reactions were positive. Chloe received anonymous phone calls filled with vitriol and threats. Someone spray-painted slurs on George's truck. But for every act of hate, there was a counterbalance of support. The diner owner who offered free pie to anyone attending the support group meetings. The high school teacher who hung a rainbow flag in her classroom window. Small gestures, perhaps, but they gave Chloe hope. As the day of her father's retirement party approached, Chloe felt a mix of dread and determination. She knew the event would be a lightning rod for town gossip and judgment, but she refused to hide or apologize for who she was, or for standing up for Sky. The morning of the party, Chloe stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress and taking deep, calming breaths. Mike appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing a kiss to her shoulder. "You look beautiful," he murmured. "And strong, like a warrior queen about to lead her troops into battle." Chloe laughed, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "Some battle? I'm more worried about dying of boredom from all the small talk." Mike's expression grew serious. "Hey, no matter what happens in there, I've got your back. We all do. You're changing lives, Chloe. Don't ever forget that." At the Legion Hall, Chloe braced herself as she walked through the doors, Mike and the kids flanking her like a protective detail. The room fell silent for a moment, all eyes turning towards them. Then, slowly, conversations resumed, punctuated by awkward glances and whispers. Chloe's mother hurried over, her smile a bit too bright. "Oh, good, you're here. Come, your father's about to give his speech." As they made their way through the crowd, Chloe caught snippets of conversation. "Can you believe she had the nerve to show up? I heard she's been filling the kids' heads with all sorts of nonsense." "Well, I think it's brave. About time this town joined the 21st century." Chloe held her head high, refusing to let the gossip affect her. She focused on her father, standing at the podium, looking uncomfortable in his dress uniform. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice gruff with emotion. "It's been an honor to serve this community for the past 40 years." As her father spoke about his career, his voice grew stronger, filled with pride for the work he'd done. Chloe felt a complicated mix of emotions: love, frustration, a lingering hurt, but also a growing respect for the man who dedicated his life to protecting others. Then, to her shock, her father's tone changed. "But the most important lesson I've learned," he said, his eyes finding Chloe in the crowd, "is that true strength isn't about enforcing rules or maintaining the status quo. It's about having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it means admitting you were wrong." A hush fell over the room as her father continued. "My daughter Chloe taught me that. She's the bravest person I know, and I'm ashamed it's taken me this long to say how proud I am of her. Chloe and all the young people like her, they're not a threat to our way of life. They're the future of it. A future where everyone is free to be who they truly are." Tears streamed down Chloe's face as her father stepped away from the podium and walked towards her, arms outstretched. She met him halfway, colliding in a hug that was decades overdue. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Can you forgive an old fool?" Chloe nodded against his shoulder, unable to speak. When they finally pulled apart, she saw that half the room was in tears. The other half looked shell-shocked, but there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. As the party continued, people who had been avoiding Chloe all night began to approach her. Some offered awkward congratulations. It wasn't universal acceptance, not by a long shot, but it was a start. Later that night, as Chloe tucked an exhausted Sky into bed, they'd insisted on staying over, the young girl looked up at her with shining eyes. Do you think I could be as brave as you someday?" Chloe smoothed Sky's hair back, her heart full to bursting. "Oh, sweetheart, you already are, and you're going to change the world. I just know it." As she closed the bedroom door, Chloe felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, she felt like she truly belonged in her hometown. Not because it had stayed the same, but because it was finally, slowly beginning to change. And she was going to be a part of that change, one conversation, one mind, one heart at a time. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.